Hey guys, it's Frederik from the FWX podcast. I want to keep talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. And of course, I'm going to do that with the second one, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And so, in this picture, in this poster, you see all the main characters on the screen. And I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about the story. I'm going to talk about the characters. I'm going to use pictures of the actors as well. And before we get started with any of that, I'm going to give you the disclaimer, of course. And I'll start again by saying that English is not my main language, but I try my best. But I sometimes still flub words, so I thought you should know that. Also, on occasion I might swear, so that's a little warning in case you're not okay with that. Also, sometimes I get a bit of sometimes I lose my train of thought, or I get ahead of myself, or I go into a tangent and I lose track of what I'm saying, and so that gives me on occasion an awkward pause. So it's good for you to know this, of course. Also, I'm reading off a screen, which means that I, which means that the screen might get brighter. I will get brighter as well. So best you should know that. It's best you should know that. Alright, let's jump into the story of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I will also be referring to what music is playing in moments, because this movie, just like the first one and the third one, is full of it, with music from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. And so I will do that when the time comes. Okay. And so we start this movie with the theme of the Guardians of the Galaxy, with Peter Quill, played by Chris Pratt. We have Gamora, played by Zoe Saldana. Damn it, I thought she was on here. I'll just bring up the other one. She's in here. This woman right here. That's Zoe Saldana. She plays Gamora. She's the green-skinned alien of the team. You also have Drax, played by this man right here, Dave Bautista. You also have Groot, now in his miniature version, as people like to call him, Baby Groot, voiced by hold up a second. Groot. Vin Diesel, right here. Here's his picture. Vin Diesel voices Groot. In this case, not in for real. I mean, because Groot is in a tiny form, and so the Guardians. And wait, I'm forgetting someone. There's also Rocket Raccoon, who is voiced by this gentleman right here, Bradley Cooper, of course. And because, a little spoiler already, because Groot stays in his tiny form all throughout this movie, I don't have to point out that Sean Gunn also does. No, sorry. I'm getting. Anyway, so the Guardians have been hired to go and help out another alien species called the Sovereign, and these are golden-skinned aliens. Yes, in fact, if you look well on this poster right here, you see right above Peter right there and Groot a golden alien right there. And so they've been tasked to deal with something, and that is to protect a specific kind of energy called annulax batteries, and they are about to. I'm going to rephrase. So, I'm going to rephrase. So, the group has been hired by the Sovereign, the golden skinned aliens, to protect those batteries that they have from what is called an obelisk, which is an interdimensional monster. But to give you an idea of what they look like, right in the corner of this poster, you see what they kind of look like. They are large, tentacled monsters that can travel between dimensions. And the group has their fight with this beast, this monster. And in various moments of this fight, this action scenes, this sequence, we see how the group works either in team or not, and how their individual styles of fighting work. For instance, Star-Lord or Peter is very ranged based, and he also has, because as you can see in this picture again, he's got those special kind of blasters. They're actually called quad blasters, apparently, as I've talked about in the first movie, in the episode that I did for the first movie. He also has these like anti-gravity, similar kind of boots compared to the repulsor technology that Iron Man uses to fly around. So Peter is a ranged, airborne kind of person when it comes to fighting. Similar to Rocket as well, only he prefers to use kind of heavy machine kind of stuff, like you can see in this picture again. While Gamora, as you see right here, she prefers more hand-to-hand combat. But of course, when you're dealing with a huge monster, that becomes a little intangible. So first we see her try her hand with a gun. Unfortunately, she gets quickly out of ammo, and so she reverts back to actually that same weapon right here. That sword that she uses. And in fact, she fights with this more than others. Also, once again, the poster, Drax's way of fighting is with these knives that he uses right here, if you can see them well. Meanwhile, Groot, because he's in his tiny version, he can't really do much, and so this is where the first song kicks in. So while the group is fighting, Groot is off loitering around, roaming, and by the way, Rocket is trying to set up an audio device so that they can listen to tunes while they work. It's almost literally what he says. And while they fight, Groot gets a hand on these two cables and he plugs them together, and we get our first song of this movie, and that is Mr. Blue Sky from the Electric Light Orchestra, which is a really good song. And we get also the dance moves of Baby Groot. And there's very good and funny moments in between everybody getting their... Well, they're trying their best to hold this creature off the obelisk, it is called, the huge interdimensional monster. But they manage to do this as Drax realizes that the outside of this beast is just impenetrable with anything, and so he jumps into this creature, and we get a little discussion with Peter and Gamora as they quibble about the inside of the creature being just as tough as the outside, and we get a scene with Drax trying to stab his way out with his knives. And Peter says to her there's a cut on its neck, and he calls to Rocket to get the monster to look up, because Rocket is also airborne. He has a kind of system where he, like Peter, can fly around. And so they try to do that. Uh, Gamora throws her gun away because she realizes that she's out of ammo, and she gets that retractable sword of hers out, and she leaps towards this monster, finds the cut, and stabs it open. Well, stabbing it first and then cutting it open as she falls to the floor. Controlled falling because she lands on her feet. And through this cut, Drax comes out. And as they have done their job, they go and meet with the person that hired them, and that is the High Priestess Aisha, who, by the way, in this movie, the actress playing the High Priestess is near. It's just almost not. It's not clear to see who exactly plays this character, so I'll show it to a picture of this person to you, and that is this woman right here, Elizabeth Debicki, who plays High Priestess Aisha. Okay, and we get a little moment with Quill and Aisha as a little bit of extra info is that the Sovereign are very stubborn when it comes to doing dirty work, and they believe that every person has a role to fulfill, and they are also very sensitive when it comes to crimes and felonies and that kind of stuff. And actually, the Guardians had a prize for getting hired and defeating that obelisk. And Gamora asks for it to be delivered, this prize. And we get to see Nebula back as she is built into this throne room. And of course, Nebula is played by another person that is non-identifiable in this movie, just like the person playing Gamora and the person playing Aisha. And that is this woman, of course, Karen Gillan, in a blue cybernetic kind of visual. Likely because she was a Kree before, which is the blue-skinned alien species from the comics and the movies. And the reason why Nebula was actually there is because she also was trying to steal those same batteries. And the group is lucky to get out of there in a moment that follows now, as Rocket opens up his big stupid mouth and says that you're really full of it for being so elite and not doing anything, basically. And so they get to leave despite Rocket's transgression. That was the word I was looking for, actually. And as they're walking away, Rocket kind of looks over to Drax and shows off the fact that actually he has stolen those same batteries now. And Drax laughs loudly as they're walking out, which leads them back to their ship. And the Sovereign realizes that the batteries are gone, and so they sent their fleet full of drones. Like I said, the Sovereign believes that their people have specific roles to fulfill, and that means that they can risk any life. And so they have a fleet full of non-manned drones. And not drones like we know in our real life, but like Well, I say big as in you could fit a person in there, but actually it's not filled with a person in there. And it's all golden too, by the way, just like their species. And so they sent the fleet after the Guardians, realizing that they have stolen those batteries, and that gets Rocket and Peter into a discussion, and they kind of have their like minds bigger situation, and they start to insult each other, and of course it's very funny. And they continue further. There's a lot of innuendo here. Rocket has a joke about, well, I'll show you punishment, and I'll put a dropping of mine. I'll keep it civil here. I'll put a dropping into your pillowcase tonight. And of course, Peter says, "You do that, I shave you." To which Rocket responds with, "It won't be one of mine. It will be one of Drax." Who then also counters with that he has famously huge ones. And of course, I'm talking about shit. Like actual shit. Which is gross, of course, when you say it like that. And so, aside everything like that, they are trying to get through an obstacle that is very dangerous to handle, and of which Drax had said that you'd have to be the best pilot in the galaxy if you can get through that field full of those obstacles. And that triggers the discussion and the friendly bickering between all of them. And so they get through finally, despite all the bickering. And Peter cuts himself off on saying, "Son of a bitch," as he and the rest sees that this sovereign fleet has just gone beyond this field and are now facing them. And meanwhile, Gamora is looking for a possible planet to go to. And one of the ways of travel in space in a galaxy is first through a kind of teleportation system. In fact, a later space and cosmic movie from in the MCU, and I'm talking about the Marvels, actually gives us the name of this system. You know what? I'll look it up for just a second. So in the Marvels, we actually get to learn what that kind of system is. There's a word for there. It's something with neural. Maybe I'm. Give me a sec. There's another way to learn this. But I wanted to mention that for a moment because you need to get through another sector through one of those kinds of planets. Give me a second. You know what? Anyway, so they first need to go one of those portals to get to another section of the galaxy. I'll say it like that. And because the ship has gotten a bit damaged because of the obstacle field that they just went through, they need to go through one of those portals first. But before that happens, they're confronted by that Sovereign fleet, and of course they think they're about to get obliterated by this fleet, only for somebody else to arrive and obliterate this fleet with one shot. And that spreads almost like lightning, it seems. And so we get a moment with the Sovereign where the general yells out, "Somebody destroyed all our ships!" And then there's a little back and forth with him and the Queen, once again played by Elizabeth Debicki. And so the group is very thankful for the person that intervened, of course. And amazingly, we get a shot of the person standing on top of whatever spacecraft they are using. And so, despite everything, the group gets through this portal and they go to a planet named Berhert, which is a very woodland kind of planet. And they crash land, and while they were getting out of that field, Drax decided to deal with the last ship that was following them. And so he hung himself onto a strong enough cord and a layer of protection, like tech basically, to get himself to deal with that remaining ship. And so he's still hanging out of that ship along with that cord. And as the ship and the group is crashing onto Berhert, you get Gamora see that Drax is almost about to fall out of the damn ship. And luckily enough for him, she intervenes quickly and she holds the cord, which has now gotten loose very suddenly, onto the ship with her between the ship and the cord. And so the group crash lands with the ship, the Milano, on this planet, on Bird, and here they how should I say this? They try to gather what just happened and also how to go forward now, because the ship is basically destroyed despite them all still alive. And so we get the arrival of whoever just saved them. And this person reveals himself to be Ego, who is a famous figure from the comics, who is relevant now to this story. And this Ego is played by the one and only Kurt Russell right here. And he reveals himself to be Peter's father. And he also introduces someone that he has brought along with him in his ship called Mantis, who is an empath that helps him sleep at night. And this woman is played, well, she's an alien with kind of tentacles above her, and she is played by this one right here, Pom Klementieff. And so they sit at night together and they have a talk with Ego and with Mantis, and Ego reveals more about what he knows and what he doesn't know. I'm gonna drink for a second. Just a moment. All right. So Peter and Ego have this talk, father to son, son to father, with the group. And we get a little reveals from all sides, basically, as Drexel had always thought that Yondu had been Peter's father all that time, with a little surprise retort from Rocket, who says, "He's blue." So, yeah, it gets quickly revealed that it wasn't Yondu. It's Ego that is Peter's father. By the way, I want to point out for a second that that is part of this adaptation, because apparently in the comics it's somebody else that is Peter Quill's father. But for the sake of this movie, I'm going to continue here. And uh, Ego also says that he used Yondu to get Peter to come to him, basically. And so, of course, Ego decides that Peter should come to his home planet where he can talk more about, well, who he is. And who Peter is supposed to be. And so Peter, Gamora, and Drax go to Ego's planet, while Rocket and Groot stay behind to repair the ship while they watch Nebula. And here in between these moments, we get our golden goddess back, Ayesha, as she confronts Yondu, Michael Rooker's character. I'll show him again. This gentleman right here. And she wants to hire him so he can go after the Guardians of the Galaxy, as the group likes to call themselves. That was my phone. Anyway. And we also get a bit of a background information on Yondu, as we see him confront the person that used to be his mentor, Stakar Ogord, who we see for the first time in this movie too, and he is played by one of the biggest actors ever, I'm betting, and then there's this gentleman right here, Sylvester Stallone. So he plays Stakar Ogord. And the reason Yondu is not glad with Stakar is because he and his crew were exiled for actually trying to deliver Peter to his father. Because part of the code for the Ravagers is that you do not indulge in child trafficking. And so we get that moment with Ayesha and Yondu as she tries to hire him to go and get the Guardians and recapture them. And we get to them actually arriving on Burhurt as they try to capture Rocket and Groot. And here we get another great song. And I'm looking it up to be sure. Also, I want to say, before I give you the song from that moment, there's a song from earlier, as the Guardians, as Peter, Gamora, and Drax are going with Ego to his planet. We get a song I have come to love, and that is The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. And I'll give you the moment. Oh yeah. So it's a song called Southern Nights by Glenn Campbell that plays as the Ravagers are approaching the camp where Rocket and Groot are trying to defend while they're holding Nebula hostage. Well, not really. She's just imprisoned, basically. And so we get to see how Rocket works alone. We get a lot of action. We see him using a lot of tech. And ultimately, he runs out of his tech, out of his toys. And we get to see for a brief moment that Rocket, despite his size and his nature, is a skilled fighter as he takes one Ravager out and then quickly another as he jumps backward to the other one and also takes him out. Again, I have to do something for a moment. Alright. So, before Rocket can go anymore, we see how a Yondu fights. Well, is supposed to fight because he stops Rocket from going any further as he uses his, I'm gonna call it a, well, there's actually a name for it. Yeah, well, hold up a second. Oh, they just call it like that. Alright, so Yondu has this thing on his head that is a fin that allows him to control a weapon by using the whistling that he can do. And so he uses that to stop Rocket from going any further, from taking out any more of his troops, of his men, his crew. And we get a back and forth between the two of them, humiliating each other a bit more. And sorry, little itch. And they kind of reach a stalemate basically. And until all of a sudden, that same fin I just talked about gets blown to smithereens as Nebula has been allowed to get out of her imprisonment, and she's now on the field having just shot that fin that Yondu was holding on to on his head. And we get to see I'm trailing off here. Sorry. So there's a moment between the group, the crew, and Yondu. You know what? He's here in this picture. I want to show him for a moment. The blue guy right here. That's Yondu. And of course there's Nebula. I wanted to show them for a moment. Also, if you look good, you'll find Mantis right here. Okay. I wanted to show that for a moment. Because I want you to picture it, because I'm not using any live scenes, of course. And so, there's this moment of sort of a stalemate, kind of a meeting, kind of break it or make it moment, as the group starts to question what are Yondu's motivations here exactly, and this causes a mutiny to happen between parts of the crew. And one side is led by another figure that we learn of here quickly, who is also played by someone I think should be mentioned, of course, here. And so there's the actor called Chris Sullivan, who plays Taserface, who literally looks like he's been tased in the face. And this is a kind of a dick, basically. I mean that literally. He so Yeah, you basically have a mutiny happening in this moment as the crew of the Ravager crew takes their sides, which leads the group and Groot and Rocket and Nebula on the Ravager ship. And this Taserface character executes all the loyalists that Yondu still had and imprisons Yondu with Rocket in a cell on the ship, while the group is still dealing with what to do with Groot. But they ultimately can't come to the decision, because they all decided it's just too damn adorable to kill, basically. Although they do humiliate it by getting it to also dress as a Ravager and just pile on him by also dumping liquids and drinks on him. Almost like the greening process, basically, for breaking in a rookie, a greenie, basically. Like that. And while that is happening, Nebula confronts the group and makes a deal with them to get a ship and get revenge on her sister. To go and get revenge on her sister. And here's a funny scene I want to highlight for a moment, that as she is now fully geared up and to go and get Gamora and trying to kill her, Kraglin, played by Sean Gunn, I want to show him again for a moment, right here in the middle, he asks Nebula what she's gonna do, and she has this villain-like monologue, and he just calmly but very funnily just says, "Yeah, I was thinking more about a pretty necklace, maybe a hat." And so it's a very funny moment, kind of underrated, in my opinion. And so the crew is just, they're getting to bed. And while they are getting to finish off, I am not making sense right now, I'm sorry. I'll rephrase. So, well, Nebula is heading out with a ship of her own now, after the little funny moments of Kraglin. The crew is dispatching the loyalists of Yondu, and they're getting ready to go to sleep. And luckily, Groot finally gets out of that little cage that he's been holding in, that he's been held in, and he finally finds his way back to Rocket and Yondu as they're stuck in a cell. And he is tasked to go and get a new fin for Yondu so he can use that arrow back by whistling. Yeah. And so we get a montage of Groot getting whatever needs, and he doesn't get it the whole time. And also, a little moment I want to highlight for a second again. Well, not again, but it's a good moment to highlight. So Yondu shows him the icon that his fin is stuck in like the drawer next to his bed. It has a symbol on his jacket, and so he gives that to Groot, and Groot, still unsure of really what to get, just holds it up to his head and is like, "You mean like a hat?" And we get that funny moment with Rocket as he interprets and translates to Yondu that he hates hats. Which is pretty funny to me. And maybe to you too. By the way, if you want, you can sound off in the comments what is your favorite moment, and also the funniest moment from this movie. And if you want, you can also do that in the past episode of Volume 1, and I'm gonna ask the same when covering Volume 3. Okay, and so Baby Groot is about to get the fin finally, but first he picks up something else because he's distracted, and then Kraglin steps in and gets it for him, and Kraglin brings Baby Groot back to the two of them to rocket into Yondu, and they start to take back the ship from Taserface, who has been insulted and humiliated by Rocket, who just can't stop doing that to Taserface. I mean, how could you not with a name like that, by the way? Okay. Um, and so they get out of the cell. They go to take back the ship from the mutineers. And here we get another incredible song. And it is Come a Little Bit Closer by Jay and the Americans as they're escaping on this ship. Also, I need to point out that, you know what, another sign-off moment in the comments here. There are a lot of great songs in this movie, and if you want, you can share them in the comments down below to keep it friendly, please. And I'll give you mine right now. So, a moment from before that I want to mention right now is that as Peter and Gamora and Drax arrive on Ego's planet, the song My Sweet Lord by George Harrison plays. And that is my favorite song from this movie. So sign off in the comments if you like. What is your favorite movie? What is your favorite song from this movie? And you can put it right there. Alright. And so, as the group as Kraglin, Yondu, Baby Groot, and Rocket are getting out of there. And also, I briefly want to say that to deal with all the mutinees, they go to a room where what looks to be like cameras is set up, a kind of control room in the ship. And as the song is also playing, we get the montage of them dealing with all these mutinees. Also, in the process, as Yondu kills Taserface by using a burned effect on his special arrow, as the fin has now been replaced with a new one, he burns Taserface alive, effectively. But that also causes most of the ship to start to fall apart. And as the ship is going down, Taserface quickly just calls up the Sovereign with the promise of letting them know who did this, and also the specific promise that if you get them, please tell them who caused their demise. Taserface! Which makes whoever is on the other line of the Sovereign to start laughing out loud. I wanted to say that for a moment because another funny moment in this movie that I think needs to be highlighted. And so that leaves the 5 of them. Groot, Rocket, Yondu, and Kraglin. Four. Sorry. I make mistakes. Happens. Okay, so the four of them leave, setting off that destruction on the ship. Taserface has contacted the Sovereign with that funny moment I just said. And we get a scene with Yondu and Rocket as Yondu says a bit more about Ego, by the way. Because Rocket said to Yondu that his old man picked. That Peter's old man picked Peter up. I'm gonna do something first for a moment. Alright. So, you have this moment where they talk about Ego for a second. And it becomes clear that Ego is not just anybody. To them and to the people on the planet of Ego. And as that is happening, they have to travel to that place, of course, but that is so far away. And here's where that neural network I was talking about for those portals to get from one sector of the galaxy to another one again, as they have to go through many of them. But a body like theirs, a mammalian body, as they apparently say in this movie, can only handle as much as they can, and they're about to go through much more than that. And so we get like a ping pong kind of situation. Like there's that old Microsoft computer game where you load up an arcade basically, and you ping pong yourself with a little ball through all of it, and it sounds like that basically. And I'm showing my age here, by the way. And so they get their way to that place. And by the way, and while this is happening, we see Quill coming to terms with his father being, as he reveals, a celestial. Someone that can manipulate matter around his consciousness to form a home planet. And he explains that he gained a human disguise so he could travel the universe and find a purpose. And that is how he eventually fell in love with Peter's mother, Meredith. And Ego also explains that he did hire Yondu to go and collect Quill after Meredith died from that brain cancer. But he was never delivered, Peter was never delivered to Ego. He had to be found. And since that happened, Ego has been looking for him for so long. And we get a little father-son bonding moment with the two of them as Ego tells them that you too can use the power of this planet for your advantage, Peter. And Ego shows off how to use it, and they form like energy together. He teaches Peter to use the energy of the planet, which makes Peter form a little ball, and they have a little playing with your father and son kind of moment, which is a pretty nice moment, considering what is just about to happen. And as this is happening, I'm gonna highlight another moment that is both important and also heartbreaking. As Mantis starts to grow close to Drax. Again, I'll show those two actors. Drax, of course, played by Dave Bautista right here. And Mantis by Pom Klementieff right here. And they have this moment as Drax is looking outside at a bunch of pools that have been made from Ego. And he says that this place reminds him of a place where he used to go with his daughter. And Mantis, being an empath, decides that she wants to know what that feels like. And so she touches Drax on the shoulder. And she experiences what could only be described as undeniable grief and mourning. And this really weighs down on you when you watch this scene. And just gutted by just how much pain and grief that Drax has had to deal with. And as that is happening, we have. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself for a moment. Yeah, one more thing about this with Drax and Mantis is that Mantis starts to, or tries to tell him basically what Ego is about to do now that Peter is there. And also, while this is happening, Gamora needs some room from Peter, who has been infuriating with all his pop culture references from the 80s and 70s, basically. As he's been saying about the unmistakable thing. He's using references to TV and music to try and deal with the fact that maybe they do have a thing and that they're getting closer to each other. But she doesn't know all of that. And Peter tries to use Cheers, the show, for instance, and which drives her away, and that gets her out of there into the more wilder and wild parts of the planet. And so, while she's outside and trying to calm down for what just happened, she finds that Nebula has finally arrived on Ego's planet and is, of course, going after her and trying to kill Gamora. And which leads Nebula. Gamora leads Nebula into a cave nearby, and we get a fight scenes with them as parts of Nebula's ship break off, and Gamora shoots the big machine gun part at her as she is stuck in this cave now. As Nebula is now stuck in this cave, and Gamora shoots with that thing, and it's a big heavy shizzle. And so we get a little confession as Gamora manages to pull Nebula out of this shipwreck, and we get an explosion, and they have another little fight as Nebula is trying to best Gamora. And finally she confesses that, I didn't want you to best me all that time. I just wanted a sister. And they basically make peace with that fact. That the past is the past. Let's continue trying to be better for each other. And so let's do better. Let's be sisters, in fact. And so they have a tender moment. But since they're stuck in those caves down below on the planet, they have nowhere else to go. And so they find a light, supposedly like the term in the trope goes of the light at the end of the tunnel. And they go towards that place while Mantis tries again to warn Drax what is about to happen to Peter, while Ego is telling Peter more about what he did, that he traveled so many places, and he finally confesses that he's been planting seedlings of his planet into other worlds, thousands of worlds, so they can be terraformed into new extensions of himself. But there's only one way to do it, and it's not just with him, but with another celestial. And here we get the other reveal as Nebula and Gamora go deeper into the caverns, and they find a lot of skeletal remains. And they hurry back out of the caves, and they find Mantis trying to tell Drax what is happening. But Mantis freaks Gamora out by saying, well, Mantis has her hands around her neck, around Mantis. I'm getting the names here through each other. So, Gamora is holding Mantis together, but Mantis has her hands on Gamora's hands. And she says, "You are afraid," which snaps Gamora out of it. Okay, I got it. And apparently, those skeletons in those caves were other children that Ego was trying to make more with, using them as batteries effectively. And he says that to Peter. He is trying to brainwash him. And he tells him that he tried to have offspring that could possibly have the celestial power that he also has. And now that he has found out that Peter has that same power, he gets to the point where he has to confess to the thing that he probably never wanted to admit to himself, and that he put the brain cancer into Meredith himself. And that snaps Peter out of the brainwashing that his father is supposedly trying to do to him. And he is pissed off by it. And he shoots him with all he has, which causes a fight between them as Peter attacks his father. Luckily, well, before I go to luckily, Ego, now glad that he does have a son with the right power to do the expansion, as he likes to call it, snaps back at Peter, saying that I wanted to do this together, but you leave me no other choice than for you to serve as a damn battery. Which I think is a nice touchback to what happened before. There was some foreshadowing happening, basically, which is good story writing and storytelling. And so Ego parasitically tries to draw the energy from Peter to start and activate the seedlings that are all over worlds across the galaxy. And they slowly they vastly and fast try to consume the worlds on which they are planted at. But he does not have enough time to do this, as Rocket, Yondu, Groot, Kraglin, yeah, I said all the names, right, finally arrive at Ego's planet, and they bust into the main place. And I like the sentence that Yondu says when he crashes in. And which ends with him saying, "Jackass!" And so, a now larger group of Guardians rescue Quill from being used as a battery for his father. And they go to the core of the planet, as Mantis explains that his real power comes from there, not from this human form that we see before us. Which, by the way, at this point has taken form of David Hasselhoff, the actor and singer. And so they go to the core. Yondu also has this moment where he says to Quill, I figured out why he was trying to get you, and I was not going to let him do that. And so, basically, that basically reveals that while Ego is Peter's bio, I'm rephrasing just right here. That basically reveals that while Ego is Peter's biological father, it was Yondu that raised him. That was his real father, despite not looking a lot like him. Okay, and so that leads them to the core. And right as this is happening, the Sovereign finally arrives with new drones that they use in the fight. And here another song starts to play. And that is Wham Bam Shangalang by Silver. And I also like this song because this starts with Kraglin phoning it in that the Sovereign is just here. And I find it funny that Kraglin actually sings along because there's a line that goes soup, soup, and then shang-a-lang-a-lang. I'm not gonna sing anymore. So we get to the point where they're trying to fight back against both the Sovereign's drones and Ego himself in now a different form. And with the ship from the Ravagers that they have, they dig through the core to make a little tunnel. To make a tunnel big enough where they can stand in. And they come up with a new plan to defeat Peter's father. And that is to get a small-sized bomb onto the main element of the core, which is Ego's brain, effectively. But there's no one small enough to go and put that bomb on the Ego's brain. But actually there is. And so Rocket explains to Groot, baby Groot, how to put the bomb on the brain. And it's a funny scene, of course, because he fails on how to do it first. Just in a tryout, I mean. But finally, as everyone is dealing with both the Sovereign and with Ego in his, let's call it an energy form, because it shows up all blue and sparkly and electricity kind of like. And so Groot takes that thing, the bomb, and goes into the brain, because he didn't understand what Rocket was saying as he was explaining it. And as Rocket looks back, he does have that funny line like, oh fuck, we're doomed. It doesn't say fuck. That's just me. And as the group is fighting the Sovereign and Ego, Peter decides to use those powers that he got from his father against him. And so he can distract yeah. And now that there's an actual ship there, the Guardians and Mantis are escaping. And finally, it's just Peter and his father dealing with each other. And ultimately, the bomb explodes on the brain inside the core, and Ego starts to melt and disintegrate as Peter says goodbye to his father. And he has this line where he says, they're the fight talking, I'm gonna call it for a moment, where Ego says, look around you. Is this what you want? To be like them? And Peter responds with, "What's so wrong with that?" And that's when the disintegration part begins as the bomb explodes, taking Ego with it. But this also causes Peter to lose those celestial powers. And in an effort to save Peter from dying, Yondu decides that this is the moment I need to be that surrogate father that I always have been for Peter, and he sacrifices himself. It's a tearful moment, of course. And finally, the group meets again as they all get on board on the ship, despite Yondu dying. And little moment I want to highlight for a second is that as Yondu decides to do that, to sacrifice himself, Groot greets, well, Groot says to him in his way, "Welcome to the Guardians of the Galaxy. You are now an honorary member, or a real member, of the team." Only for them to leave, and then Rocket to Groot. Rocket says to Groot, "We really need to work on your language," which indicates that he didn't just say, "Welcome to the Guardians of the Galaxy." He said, "Welcome to the fucking Guardians of the Galaxy." Yeah. Okay. And so that causes Yondu to give his life so that Quill can live. And we get the last couple of scenes from them as Nebula, while glad that she has reconciled with Gamora, decides to resume her quest to kill Thanos and leaves. And the Guardians hold a funeral for Yondu, while dozens of Ravager ships show up, having heard what Yondu has done, and accept him as Ravager again in his last moments as he's about to die. And that is where the movie ends. And I'm gonna give you, of course, the song, which is "Father and Son" by Cat Stevens, which plays at the very end here, which is obviously a very relevant song here. And it's also a beautiful song. And before I end this episode, I want to also say that we have another post-credit scene and also a mid-credit scene, as Kraglin is now taking up the telekinetic arrow that Yondu has been using, along with the control fin for it. And in that same moment, Stackard Ogre, played by Sylvester Stallone, meets back up with his teammates and fellow Ravager captains. And actually, a fun little moment here is that we see a lone little object that it starts to play with a voice. I want to point out for a moment that that isn't just any voice. That is Miley Cyrus given a little sentence into the MCU. I wanted to point that out. And then also, to finally finish this episode, I want to give you the last bit of information, and that is that we meet back up with the Sovereign, and we see a large golden cocoon that the Sovereign have made up and hope to have like an ultimate weapon to be dealing with. And Ayesha, played by Elizabeth Debicki, says, "I shall call him Adam," which implicates Adam Warlock to come. And that is likely to happen because we do see him in Volume 3. And that is where this episode ends for now. So, thank you very much for watching and listening to this episode of the FWX podcast. You can leave a like on this video if you like. You can also sign off in the comments about what's your favorite song from this episode and in the movie. Also, you can subscribe to the channel if you like. I'd be very happy if you do that. So, thank you for all of that. Also, please share this with your friends, your family, and your colleagues, or here on YouTube maybe, or on social media if you like. So, that is all that. Thank you so much for all your support to the channel and to me. And I hope to see you in the next video when we cover Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I've been Frederik for the FW podcast. See you in the next video.